Good afternoon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our presentation, Town and Country, A Tale of Two Crashes. My name is Stacy Graczyk. I'm a traffic safety resource prosecutor from the state of Vermont. First and foremost, before we get started, I have to read this little blurb aloud for you. Please note that this session, along with all related questions and answers, is being recorded and/or live streamed with closed captioning. Presenters and audience members may be on camera. Recorded material will be available for on-demand viewing within 1 week of the conference at www.lifesaversconference.org. And now, on to our presenters. We have with us on the left, Erin Inman, the director of the National Traffic Law Center. That's through the National District Attorneys Association. Prior to joining the NTLC, Erin practiced law in the state of Montana, where she still currently resides. She was elected as the Prairie County Attorney. She's guest lectured throughout the country on prosecuting traffic cases, and she has launched Montana's TSRP program. She's taught at the Montana Law Enforcement Academy and participated in several criminal justice publications and curricula. And fun fact, prior to that career, she served her country as a pharmacy technician in the Army Reserves. Welcome, Erin. And next we have Jason Samuels. He is a senior TSRP, Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor, for the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia. Jason started his career in the criminal justice field as a law enforcement officer with the LAPD in 1990. Later on, he went to serve as a law enforcement officer in the state of Georgia before becoming a lawyer. He has since served the state of Georgia in various counties in various roles as senior assistant district attorney, assistant district attorney, and assistant solicitor general. In his current role as a TSRP, he provides training and support to prosecutors and law enforcement officers throughout the state of Georgia. And another fun fact, Jason also served in the Marine Corps prior to these careers. So we have two illustrious. And just before we get started, we want to encourage you throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, comments, things to add, just raise your hand throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait to the end. I'll have a microphone at the back. I'll be looking out for you, and we'll come out if you have anything to say or ask. Thank you. And here we go.
Thank you. I also wanted to note that Kenney is in the corner. We did not put Corey in the corner. He volunteered. He's the Kansas TSRP, and he's also been an integral part of putting this presentation together. And throughout this presentation, whether you are live streaming or present in the audience, we will have Kahoot questions. So get your cell phones out and get that app. We'll give you a moment to do that. This will be an easy way for you to participate if you don't want to raise your hand. Like Stacy said, if you have something to add to the discussion, I found in a room full of professionals, oftentimes there's something great that I learned from the audience. So if there's something that you are particularly motivated to share with us, please raise your hand and do so. We encourage that. Oh, look at all those great names. I like esteemed lemming. All right, I see a couple more phones, and then we'll move on, and we'll give this a test. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's move on. We'll give it a go. And well, there's another countdown. We're going to have a whole session of countdowns. All right, we wanted to start out by finding out who we do have in the audience with us. Like I said, your profession matters. It's an integral part of saving lives on our roadways, and we want to see who we have here. How many of you are others? Go and show me your hands. Go ahead and tell, while we're waiting for this. Oh, there we go. Others, who do we have? The 10 others. Shout out who you are.
State DOT.
State DOT? Car seat safety, welcome. We're happy to have you here. All right, now we have one more question. We have mostly, it looks like law enforcement, that's not a surprise, and a good disbursement of others. We want to know where you're from. Today we're talking about rural jurisdictions, urban jurisdictions, the differences and the similarities. And so we thought it would be useful to know where everybody comes from. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. I live in Montana now. And as you heard from Jason's biography, he's lived all over the country. What is your favorite state tonight at around 9 o'clock, I think it is?
All right, so I am a graduate of Purdue University. Thank you very much. If everybody could please, if we could just wish upon an eclipse or on a star, we would really appreciate it in Boilermaker Nation. Thank you very much. But I'm originally from Indiana. That's where I grew up, and of course I've lived in California, Rhode Island, Georgia, Florida, been around.
I'm guessing Colorado's going to have the most pins. What do you think, Jason?
Probably so.
Probably. Look
Wow.
at that. Oh, look at all the Hawaii. That's great. We need to get Alaska to represent next time. Alaska? We have Alaska? Very nice. Thank you for playing. All right, great. Thank you and welcome everybody. It looks like we have a nice disbursement of both rural and urban jurisdictions represented just by show of hand. If you think if you consider yourself from a rural area, raise your hand. Great. And we'll flesh that out a little bit later. How about urban areas? Well, welcome one and all. Jason, this is your organization now.
Yes, the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, as you can tell from the slide, was established in 1975. We are a state-funded organization that provides training and operational support to police officers and prosecutors across Georgia. We have a number of different subject matter experts in just about any area of prosecution and investigation that you can happen to name. I am a traffic safety resource prosecutor. We've got another one here. I think he's here, Gib Crosby. Yep. And we make up part of the traffic safety team. Our focus is impaired driving and serious traffic investigations and prosecutions. You have probably figured out, based on what you do, that area of law is one of the most, I think possibly the most difficult areas of law to investigate, number one, and secondly, to prosecute. Impaired driving cases are tough. They are tough. We are there to try and make that better and try and make us all more effective.
Thanks, Jason. Like Stacy said, I'm with the National Traffic Law Center, and I have 3 of my team members here with me today. We work under funding from NHTSA. We have some funding from FMCSA, the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators, responsibility.org. So we have a variety of funders that help us put the word out on how to be safe on our roadways and on our waterways. I was going to ask my team to stand up real quick and wave. They were very excited that they got to stand up. So yes, bravo. We have quite a few publications, and the easiest way to view those publications is in our resource guide. Here is a QR code. This is the only resources that we're giving to you today. I thought it made sense to put their patch up. Plus, there just aren't a lot of pictures from Prairie County out there because there are only, well, you'll see 1,200 people there. Let's compare the 2 jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Right? 1,200 people in Prairie County. The town of Terry is the county seat in Prairie County, and it had 600 people while I was there. It still has about 600 people. We were talking, and we will in a little bit, about the funding sources for our departments. My department, my sheriff's department, had 3 people in it, Jason. 3 people.
Yeah.
We had the sheriff, the undersheriff, and the deputy sheriff. That was the whole sum of our department. Guess how many prosecutors we had? We had 0.5 prosecutors. That was me. I was elected, and not only was I a prosecutor, but I was also responsible for all the civil work. In the state of Montana, the county attorney is responsible for all felonies in the county. I was also responsible for the misdemeanors, and I did all the civil work, which meant when the commissioners were having meetings, I was there. When they were hiring people and had HR questions, I was there. So it was a jack of all trades and master of none, and nothing is more terrifying than not going to trial regularly and then knowing that you have a trial tomorrow, because you're getting out your evidence book and you're literally going back to law school and refreshing what are the rules of evidence. That's what it was like practicing law out there. The other half time of my job, and there were several prosecutors, county attorneys' offices in eastern Montana, that's where I practiced, that were intentionally designed. So even if they had more than one prosecutor in their office, they were intentionally designed to have 3/4 time or half time positions available to the people so that those prosecutors could also have private practice. So it was a way to incentivize professionals to live in our more rural jurisdictions. We'd give you insurance and job security, and you can have a private practice on the side. None of us did criminal law as defense attorneys in those roles. It was primarily a civil practice for everybody else. I, however, enjoyed prosecuting. That was what I was known for out there. So the adjoining counties, when they had conflict work, would call me, and that's what my private practice was prosecuting in adjoining counties.
So the Los Angeles Police Department was a little bit bigger, just a little bit bigger. When I joined the department in January of 1990, the size of the department was hovering just around 8,000 officers. Again, now, today, there are just under 9,000 officers that work for the LAPD. The department has set as a goal reaching 10,000. They've had difficulty getting to that number. If you work in law enforcement or prosecution, you are undoubtedly aware that we are having a difficult time attracting brand new recruits into our profession. Number of reasons for that, but we're just having a hard time filling the spaces. That's true in Georgia, it is true in Los Angeles, and that was also true, again, in 1990. When I joined the department, again, we were around 7,500 officers, spread out over, at the time, 18 different geographical patrol divisions, or they now call them areas. The department has expanded, it's grown in size. Area, but it's added essentially 3 patrol areas. So there are now 21 patrol divisions in the LAPD. Each one operates effectively as its own mini police department. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office has about 1,200 prosecutors, 1,200 assistant and deputy district attorneys that work there. The population of the greater Los Angeles County area is about 11 million people. By contrast, the state of Georgia is about 10 million. So there are more people that actually live in LA County than live in my entire state. And state border to border in Georgia, we've got about 1,200 prosecutors. There are some benefits. There are some benefits to having a department that large. There are also some drawbacks. There are also some very serious drawbacks. One of the problems that Los Angeles experienced, and that I think it still does, is that even though that department is as large as it is, for the size of the community that it serves, and we're going to get to square miles here too, I think, in a second.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
So square miles for the city of Los Angeles, just a little under, 500 square miles. And then...
Yeah, Prairie County is a big one.
Yeah.
This is not unusual for western states. We have 56 counties in Montana. Prairie County is about 1,700 square miles, which is larger than the state of Rhode Island. Rhode Island's population is about 1 million. Our population now, with the influx of a lot of people from COVID, we've been discovered, so to speak. We're at 1.1 million across the entire state. So not a lot of people and a whole lot of square miles. And Jason and I, when we were looking at this, all these different numbers, the regular conversations that I've heard other people have came up. Well, Jason, you had specialized units at LAPD, so it was easier for you to investigate a crash.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, we discussed that, but
You told me, yes, well, you had time to investigate a crash. Well, that's true, but we don't have time to train our officers on how to investigate crashes. We don't have time to send them 6.5 hours to Helena. I mean, when one person from the Prairie County Sheriff's Office leaves Prairie County, there's a third of our office gone, a third of our coverage, and that is significant when you're looking for 24-hour, 7 days a week. We don't have the funding available, and this is linked to square miles. Prairie County, anybody here heard of the Conservation Reserve Program? Anybody? There's some ag people here. So in 1985, there was this great push that was going to help, and it has helped save our soils. It's set aside marginal lands to help reduce soil erosion across our country. And what it basically does is it pays our farmers not to farm and to let their fields go unfarmed and have vegetation hold the soil in place because we were losing a lot of soil. Well, what happens when you take land out of production? You lose jobs, you lose people. Prairie County in the 1980s was twice the size that it is now, and the community was much more of a footloose type vibe, and it was much more of a dying community. It was the second most elderly county in the United States. So when you lose people, and in Montana, when you lose money, you lose funding sources. The sheriff's office and the county attorney's office was funded by property taxes, and the value of the property went down. In addition to that, there is a lot of federal land in Prairie County, and the feds don't pay taxes at the same rate that people do. Payment in lieu of taxes does not help fund at all, really, so that was a problem for us.
yeah. And of course in Los Angeles, I don't know if you folks remember, this is going back a long time, back to the 1970s, but one of the first tax revolts in California happened in the 1970s, and that was one of the first tax revolts actually in the United States with the passage of Proposition 13. I believe that was passed in 1973, and essentially what that proposition did, it was a voter referendum that was endorsed by the citizens of the entire state of California. It locked property taxes in place at essentially what the assessed value was in 1973, and that valuation would not change until the property was sold or changed hands. That essentially was it. And of course, the value of property in Los Angeles County has exploded since 1973, but Prop 13 is still in place, and that's still there. And some folks actually still own their homes that they owned in 1973. They figured out ways to pass them down and hold on to them and keep them. That had a tremendous impact on the budgets of local communities. Police departments, fire departments, local schools are funded largely by the collection of property taxes, and that hit LA hard. And so a lot of the road construction stopped, a lot of the expansion of departments stopped, police department and fire department. There were some brownouts in fire stations that they had to essentially shutter them because they didn't have the personnel to staff them and work them. And that also was one of the reasons that the size of the LAPD in 1973 was 7,500 officers. When I joined the department in 1990, the size of the LAPD was 7,500 officers. And again, that sounds like a lot of cops, but when you consider the ratio of citizens to the number of police officers, that's actually a very low ratio. When I worked in Van Nuys Division, which is in the San Fernando Valley, in the summer of 1991, population of Van Nuys, the resident population, was about 300,000 people. On morning watch, we would typically field, anybody got any guesses how many units we'd put in the field? 20? It's a good guess. That may have done it. We did 3. Yeah, we would roll out with 3. And that was, again, drastically under-policed. That was not enough cops to satisfy the needs of that community. So the question is, how did they get by? How did they do it? And the LAPD learned how to become extraordinarily effective and efficient at screening out calls. During that period, 97% of the calls that came into the department for emergency services, these are 97 out of 100 people that pick up the phone calling 911 because they believe they have an emergency that requires immediate police response. 97% of those folks got sent to a call taker. 3 out of 100 actually saw a police officer roll up and talk to them and try to deal with their issue. So efficient, yes. Is it great for community relations? Not at all. No, not at all. If somebody's car is stolen, I understand there's no evidentiary value there to be collected. There's a pile of broken glass where the driver's side window used to be and an empty spot in the driveway, right? No tools left, nothing to take prints off of. This is in a day before. Ring cameras, so there's no video footage to collect. Essentially, it's going to be us coming out saying, we're sorry, taking a report, getting back in the car and taking off. And the department figured you can do that over the phone. And we could have. But there is something to that physical presence of the police officer in the community so the community knows that the department cares. And that was one of the things that I think made it very difficult for the LAPD, especially at that time, to maintain as positive a relationship with the community that it could have. So that is definitely a downside.
But you were able to respond to every single crash and investigate really, really well, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. So this is the Walmart test. 14 is the number of Walmarts in Los Angeles. 39 is the number of miles we had to travel on the interstate to get to a Walmart. And it was not in Prairie County. And what I think this highlights with regard to crash investigations is, I'm just going to share an anecdote. Whenever we, an overarching principle that we had in our community, we were very into helping each other. If Miss Barb across the street, who's 90 years old, needs her lawn mowed, we made sure that somebody got out there and mowed her lawn. Because Miss Barb was a member of our community and it was important to have her there. She was valued. If my neighbor, Jason, needed groceries and I was running to town because Matilda had dance lessons that night, I would ask Jason, do you need any groceries while we're in town? And Jason would say yes or no, and we'd get them. So we knew each other, we valued each other, and we helped each other. That was built in. The sheriff's office, and real quick, I want to circle back around. Sheriff's office had to live in Prairie County. You did not live in the area that you patrolled, right?
No, absolutely not. Most officers, as a matter of fact, had long commutes to get into the city for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was difficult to afford a house in the city of Los Angeles on what they paid a police officer. And if you worked in certain neighborhoods, you just didn't want to live there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, everybody wanted to live in Terry, all 600 of them. But the sheriff's office, because they lived in the community, they were very cognizant of their after-hours behavior. And so they, by and large, didn't ever drink. If they wanted to go to a restaurant, they'd have to go to a bar. They'd always sit on the restaurant side, but they rarely did so. So their life was 24/7, immersed in the community, being a good example. The flip side of that was they knew everybody. They knew who had issues. They knew what family members were having a tough time. So as far as the 1,200 people in Prairie County, they were very well represented. If people were traveling through on the interstate, and I'll show you here in a little bit, the crash that we're going to look at is also an interstate. If they were traveling through on the interstate, we would know that they were there. We'd know there's a crash there. But if they were somewhere else in those 1,700 square miles, the response time may be dramatic. I lost my clicker. So that's the significance of the Walmart test there for Prairie County. Again, when it comes to a crash, when you're in an urban jurisdiction, chances are that you have an almost immediate response to that crash. In the rural jurisdictions, if the crash happens out on the road, you have to wait until another driver comes by and spots you, and that could take hours in some instances. This is an example of why that is so critical. Not only may you not be found very quickly, but once you're found, if we're packaging you up, now I'm going to point to where Terry is, right there, and this is where the interstate runs, right here, and this is North Dakota over here. I didn't remember if I saw any North Dakotans. Are there any North Dakotans here? Yeah, go North Dakotans. So you can see we are 30 minutes by airplane to get to Billings, which is critical care. What would normally happen in Terry, though, if you were found in Prairie County, is we would package you up, send you to Miles City. Miles City would do a quick assessment. Miles City's 13,000 people. And then Miles City would get you a life flight to Billings. And from Billings, if you needed urgent care, you were probably sent to Denver, which is an hour and 40 minutes. You could have been sent to Seattle. You could have been sent to Salt Lake City. So I encourage everybody, when you see those numbers in Montana, because we have a drinking culture in Montana. That is true. But when you see the numbers, take into account some of our geography also, and some of our ability to respond in a way that we can enhance the likelihood that you will survive a crash. Some of those numbers are because we don't find you until later. We just don't have the same medical services that some of the more urban jurisdictions do. Any questions on that or comments? We're not going to go over all of the issues. Man, we probably spent hours talking about the differences between urban and rural. I will show you the interstate where this crash occurred out near Hardin here in a little bit, after Jason talks about his crash. Lighting in rural jurisdictions is non-existent. I remember I went to Pepperdine Law School, and I flew to Helena for an interview, and I got off of the plane. I think there were 2 gates back then at the airport. Now we have 3. And I went and got my rental car, and I got on the interstate, and I was sure I was going the wrong way because there were no lights on the interstate in town for me to see where I was going. So even in town, this was a couple decades ago, a little while ago, so we have more lighting now, but that's in Helena, which is about 35,000 people in the city itself. So think of those more rural jurisdictions. Lighting's an issue, width of road is an issue. Road closures, Jason and I argued at first over how much easier it must be to have a crash in a rural jurisdiction because you don't have the same pressures of traffic, except guess what? We don't have all the roads either. So if we have one road going through the county, then that's the only way in or out, and so a road closure shuts down traffic in the same way, in a different way, but it has the same consequences. And staffing. These are all different in urban versus rural jurisdictions, and we'll let you imagine that while we jump into our next Kahoot. So with all of that being said, we had that quick hand up earlier on whether you were from an urban or a rural jurisdiction. Now go back to your Kahoot, and let's see how many. Oh, did I do that, Corey, or did you? Kahoot is getting excited. We want to know. What we want to know is how big your jurisdiction actually is, because sometimes that question I asked at the beginning was subjective. Are you from urban or rural? Now we want to narrow it down to how big it is. And because we're having technical difficulties, let's just do a show of hands. How many are from a jurisdiction that is 10,000 or less? My people. How about between 10,000 and 100,000? Okay. Between 100,000 and 1 million? And how many are over 1 million? Okay. So at the extremes, for those of you who are live streaming, if you didn't see that, for the extremes, less than 1,000 and more than 1 million, we had a few hands. And I think it was about evenly dispersed. My math brain counted about the same number of hands for those other 3. This little section right here, I take it this is working, Corey? Oh. Yeah. So let's try this one. What is the most important issue for urban area crashes? Go ahead and type in your response, please. Let's see what you have to say. And there is no wrong answer here. I feel like we should be talking, Jason. Say something.
I think this is where we had jokes, right?
You were going to tell one.
Yeah, what joke was I going to tell? I can't remember. I can't remember either.
How long have you been TSRP, Jason?
So I've been at TSRP for 7 years.
Excellent.
How about that?
Best job in the world right there.
Yeah, it is a pretty good job. It is a pretty good
All
job.
right.
Now we've got our answers.
Oh, wow. Most important issue for urban area crashes. Jason, I'm going to let you pull out a few that resonate to you. And
So
then
let's
I think,
see.
and we were going to jump into your crash right after that.
Dealing with the traffic to get to the crash. Yeah, okay. You've got to fight your way to even get to the scene in, again, certain areas. DUI, of course, it's always a challenge. The investigation, the proof of that, again. Secondary crashes, that's a big one. People stuck in traffic, they want to get around it, and they wind up causing 6 or 7 more crashes before you can get that one cleared. Damage to and reopening the road, exactly. It's not just the investigation that we're talking about, it's also cleaning up the aftermath of whatever crash you happen to be investigating before you can get that road opened again. Length of time, again, to get help, depending on the jurisdiction, sure, that can be a huge factor. And after certain crashes, minutes can matter to survival of the victims. So getting that assistance quickly is critical. Roadway conditions, getting to the crash, oftentimes no place to pull over. Traffic control during the investigation of the crash, exactly right, exactly right. Do you have the personnel to make sure that you can adequately close that road and protect the investigating officers at the scene? Definitely important.
All right. Well, with that, Jason,
All right.
it's all you. Let's hear about your crash.
All right, so we're going to talk about an urban crash worked by big police departments. And this crash actually occurred in the city of Atlanta. Doesn't that look great? Yeah, it's really pretty. Yes, somebody said the worst traffic in the world. Yeah, you know what, I actually read a couple of studies in preparation for this, and a number of studies actually put Atlanta in the top 10. So I think if we really try a little bit harder, we can move up, maybe top 5. Yeah, exactly. Atlanta is, I've got to tell you, and it's not just because I live there and work there and the citizens of Georgia pay my salary, but I can tell you absolutely that Atlanta is a fantastic city. It's just a great city. Terrific restaurants. It's got a vibrant art scene. We have the Braves, for crying out loud, if you're a baseball fan. I have heard that we have a professional football team, but I'm not sure that anybody has been able to prove that. What's that, Gib? It's still working on that one. Yeah, we're gonna move up. But Atlanta is a fantastic city, and especially over the last 30 to 40 years, a lot of people have found that out and have moved there. A lot of corporations have moved there, and if we didn't know that by reading local news, drive on the Atlanta interstates would certainly tell us. Traffic in Atlanta is horrendous, So this is the freeway map of the city, and if you look at this, I'm sure you're all traffic safety professionals and traffic professionals. You'll get an idea of why Atlanta traffic is the mess that it is. So Interstate 75, which begins in the upper left and goes down to the sort of the lower right to the middle, that interstate starts in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and it takes you all the way down through the Midwest, and it terminates in Miami, Florida. And if you think about kind of the geography there, right? Along that route, you're going to have the city of Detroit, which sounds kind of weird to think of Detroit as a major port city, but it is because there are a couple of really big lakes that are very close to Detroit. A lot of freight moves over the Great Lakes and is offloaded in and around Detroit. That means a lot of freight that is coming to the rest of the United States, if it's traveling by truck, is going to come down Interstate 75. If it's coming to the southeast, it's going to come down I-75, and there's a very good chance it's going to go straight through the city of Atlanta. If you look to the right, you've got Interstate 85 that starts in Florence, Michigan. It comes right down through the city of Atlanta, and it eventually ends on Montgomery, Alabama. Did I say Michigan? I said Michigan. South Carolina, Florence, South Carolina, and it comes all the way down. I'm getting all this mixed up. 85 actually starts in Petersburg, Virginia. I'm terribly sorry. And then comes down, and it goes down through Montgomery, Alabama. If you think about kind of the location of those places too, large port cities around, a lot of traffic, a lot of freight moves along those interstates. And then Interstate 20, which cuts right across the center of the city, that begins in Florence, South Carolina, and it ends in Texas and travels across, again, the southern states on its way. Those are big roads. A lot of traffic moves on those roads. A lot of freight moves on those roads. And the way the roads were designed, they all happen to meet in Atlanta. They all just happen to meet in Atlanta. Now, the city of Atlanta had some choices to make when these roads were being expanded and being improved. The choices essentially revolved around this question. We've got two major interstates, I-75 and I-85, that are going to essentially come together or come very near each other in the city of Atlanta. What do we do about that? The answer that was actually chosen, which I think was probably the wrong answer, was here's what we're going to do. We're going to merge them, we're going to merge them into one interstate right here, And where are we going to do that? We're going to do that right in the center of the city. That was the wrong answer. This is actually called the connector. So Interstate 75 and Interstate 85 essentially become one interstate. And where does that happen? Right in the middle of the city of Atlanta. And what are we going to do? Just to add to the fun, we're going to cut Interstate 20 right across the middle of it, right? That essentially is what we're dealing with the traffic pattern in Atlanta. I-285, we refer to that as the perimeter. That runs around the city of Atlanta. What we encourage most people to do if they're not actually stopping in the city is to take I-285 around just to alleviate the pressure on the traffic inside the city. So that essentially is the road system, the interstate road system that we are dealing with. Most people that live in Atlanta are going to find their way onto an interstate at some point in time during their commute to and from work. Very few people living in Atlanta are going to commute solely on surface streets. And if you're wondering if we have a public transportation system, there's a rumor that we do, much like there's a rumor that we have a professional football team, but nobody has actually been able to prove that. So there is not a great deal of public transportation. The crash that we're going to talk about happened here. Can you guys see that? That's Interstate 20, right before the exchange to I-285. Right before the exchange to I-285. Again, we're traffic safety professionals. If you think about the impact on traffic of a crash that occurs right there and let your imagination run. Then imagine that you're going to shut down traffic on Interstate 20 in both directions, in all lanes. A complete shutdown, absolutely. And imagine that shutdown is going to last for 13 hours to investigate this crash. So the crash that we're going to talk about is a fatal crash. We are going to have some photos of the aftermath of the crash. I do want to take a minute, to acknowledge, really that the reason that we do this work is because it matters, and it matters to the families of the victims of these crashes. And we present this information, again, with the greatest respect for the people that were involved in it, the people that were hurt, the people that were killed, and also for the troopers and police officers and firefighters that worked this crash. Essentially, this is a diagram of exactly what happened. This is I-20 running east and west. The westbound lanes are going to be at the top, eastbound lanes are going to be at the bottom. Vehicle number one, this is a 2000 Freightliner semi-truck with a trailer fully loaded. It was traveling east on I-20. If you go further west, that's going to be the state of Alabama, so it's traveling into the city of Atlanta towards I-285. This exit lane is actually the exit to Interstate 285, that perimeter that we discussed. This truck was traveling a little faster than the speed limit. A little, not much. Probably about 5 to 7 miles an hour over the limit. They were in the fourth lane. They were in the exit lane. The thing that's tricky about this is that if you go back about 5 miles, or even not even that far, this is not an exit lane. That is a lane of travel. That is a traffic lane. It is the shoulder traffic lane. It becomes an exit lane to prepare cars to enter onto 285. Whether the driver of the truck was not paying attention or not, he found himself staring at a line of cars that had backed up because they were waiting for traffic to clear on the ramp to Interstate 285. Essentially what had happened was he found himself with a lot less, he found himself with a need to stop. And he did not have enough brake for the amount of space that he had. Simply didn't have enough brake for the amount of space that he had, so he had to take some kind of action. What he decided to do, where these marks are here, is execute a hard left turn. So he is essentially going to travel northbound on an east-west interstate. He does it. He strikes this median here. His tractor travels up over the concrete median. We've got some pictures of the median. It then flips over onto its side, the passenger side, and the truck begins to slide down the interstate. The motor becomes detached. There's the motor from V1. This is a Detroit diesel engine. Weight of that motor is about 2,000 pounds, 2,200 pounds. So I'll tell you what let's do. I want you to take a look at vehicle number 2 and also vehicle number 3. Vehicle number 2 and vehicle number 3. Vehicle number 3 is the vehicle that contained our fatal injury victim. So, this is the semi-truck. You can see that's the concrete barrier that the truck traveled up and slid down. If you can see that, this is the undercarriage of the truck. The open space on the left side of the picture is where the engine had been. Where the engine had been. This is vehicle number 2. This is vehicle number 2, passenger side, obviously. This is the same vehicle on the driver's side. Same vehicle on the driver's side. That's vehicle number 3. That's our fatal injury vehicle. The victim at this time, by this time, had been removed from the vehicle. That's the motor. That's a section of the wall that was knocked out by the impact of the truck. Now what I'd like to do is go back. And based on the photographs that we saw in the diagram, can anybody tell me exactly what happened? Any guesses? Yes, sir.
There we go.
Yeah, what do you think? Exactly. That's exactly right. But it's not just the motor fell on top of the car. Something absolutely not equipped to handle the amount of traffic that normally travels along Interstate 20. So, I mean, the traffic backup here is going to be massive. It's all the way back to Birmingham, Alabama, going in that direction. Yes? Pressure from above. When are we going to open this up? Yeah. The State Department of Transportation is calling because they're getting calls from trucking companies and shipping companies saying, listen, I've got, loads that are stacked up in South Carolina that cannot get through Atlanta because you've got this road shut down. So there is tremendous pressure. Luckily, the Georgia State Patrol has good support from their higher-ups. The DOT actually came out and did a scene survey as they were there. But yeah, there is a tremendous amount of pressure to get this road open. Tremendous amount of pressure to get this road open. This happened about 7:30 at night. That is close to the end of the evening rush hour, but you're still in the evening rush hour at this time. So these are people trying to get home. It's very tough. So there is a tremendous amount of pressure to get this road open. Tremendous amount to get this road open. And as you can tell, I mean, we've got alternate routes to go, but none of that is adequate to get this done. In case you're curious, the driver of the truck was cited for too fast for conditions, essentially. He was charged with what we have in Georgia as a second-degree vehicular homicide. That is a misdemeanor charge, essentially. The way that our statute works, that if a person commits a traffic violation that results in a death, unless it is one of the very serious traffic violations that are set out as a predicate, that's handled as a misdemeanor, second-degree vehicular homicide, driver entered a plea of no contest, which is probably does not seem like justice to the family, but essentially that's the way that our law operates. No, matter of fact, the driver did make a statement to the officer. He said, "I was just, I was in this lane. I was not aware that traffic was going to be backing up, and my guess is, I don't know if he was on a device or anything, but he was possibly distracted. But again, he comes to a point where he realizes that he is running out of road. He's running out of road fast, and he just doesn't have enough brake to get that truck stopped." Yes, sir. Do you have another question? Okay. All right. Was there anything else I was going to cover on that? We good?
Question over here, Jason?
Yes. So that's an excellent question. So the question is, what would the driver have been trained to do? And to answer that question, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what commercial vehicle operators would be trained to do in that circumstance. I can tell you that along this section of I-20, whether this driver knew that or not, if he had decided to go to the right, if he had left the roadway to the right, there is a gully, and then there is some totally inadequate fencing, and then he's going to be in somebody's living room, right? So whether that factored into that driver's decision or not, or whether some action had to be taken, and he said, I've got to make a choice, I'm picking one, I'm going left. Again, at the time that he made that left turn, he's looking at a concrete barrier. Hard to say if he was aware that he had enough speed that he was going to actually climb up that barrier and enter the westbound lanes of traffic, or if he thought the barrier would stop him, or if he thought he could, possibly coast along that barrier, or regain control of his truck and actually continue on in either the one or two lanes of that interstate, because he had clearance on his side going his direction. There was another truck that actually came and ran into him once he had flipped over and started to slide. But again, that was relatively minor damage considering how serious the crash was.
Any other questions?
So obviously this crash investigation was extraordinarily involved. And if I had received this call as a patrol officer, I would have looked at it, and the first thing that I thought was, I have no idea, right? We need to get some more people out here, and we need to get some folks that actually know how to put a crash together. And it just, they relied again on the expertise of these troopers, relied on the expertise of the troopers, their training. But again, the other thing I think it's important to think about when you're talking about urban jurisdictions and bigger jurisdictions is that these communities and larger cities are going to place different demands on their police departments than I think rural jurisdictions are going to place. Just as an example, and not to tell war stories, but when I graduated from the police academy in Los Angeles, my first night working a shift, and we worked 2 officer cars out there, just all the way through. That was the way that they essentially designed their patrol strategy. It was called the basic car plan. But my first call out of the police academy was a drive-by shooting that by the time we got there had turned into a 187, so a homicide. So we're actually putting up a crime scene. That was my first call. My last call as a police officer with that department was a verified explosion. Somebody had put together a pipe bomb, essentially. They'd gotten into a dispute with their neighbor, and they had thrown it into the neighbor's front window and blown up the neighbor's front room. And here's the thing. It was my second bomb call of the day, right? The first bomb call was actually a device had been found at the headquarters of essentially an agricultural association, which was in a dispute with some workers. Guy showed up in the morning to open up the building, and there was a device sitting on the front steps, and he thought, well, somebody's left an old coffee can with all these wires hanging out of it. I probably ought to throw this away. So he picked it up and started to walk back to the dumpster in the back of the building and thought, that's a little heavy for a coffee can. Maybe I should call the police. But she did, which was good because it actually was a device. The point being that not only do these officers have the training to do this kind of work, but they are also called to do it all the time. They get called a lot. There are lots of crashes, maybe not necessarily as involved as this one, but there are lots of crashes in and around metropolitan Atlanta. And so these officers have the opportunity, and they are called on to investigate them a lot. So they put the training into practice.
Yeah, that is not the same where I come from. And what we lack in resources, we make up for in planning. But before we get into the crash that was near Hardin, let's go to the Kahoot again. Get your phones out. Now, can you, is this one the right one, Corey? What is the most important issue for urban area crashes? So what's after Jason's talk, what did you take out of that, or is there something other than what Jason talked about? Jason, what do you think is the most important issue for urban area crashes?
So I think, honestly, I think probably the most important issue is avoiding the secondary crashes, right? I think that's going to be critical. Oftentimes when police officers, firefighters are called to a scene, the damage has already been done, right? We can't necessarily fix the damage that has been done, but if we can prevent further damage from being done, I think we're doing good work. So preventing secondary crashes, preventing secondary injuries, stopping the injuries at least where we find them, I think it's going to be critical.
So being proactive and making sure it doesn't happen.
Exactly.
To a greater degree. I feel like there should be a drum roll.
All right, Nimble Elephant, thank you.
So those are related, traffic flow and onlookers. All right, now we're going to move into rural. Ready? Okay. Hardin, I thought it would be fun to contrast the welcome to Atlanta sign with what it looks like to welcome to Hardin, not just Hardin, but the city center. Notice all the agricultural area, and you're 1 mile from the city center of Hardin, and Hardin is on the interstate. And I'm sure many of you have been driving, especially if you're in Colorado, you're familiar with scenarios like this, where there are miles and miles and miles of land and very, very few people. And Hardin is in southeast Montana. It is on the interstate. On your way to Billings, which is the biggest city in Montana. What else do I want to say about this? Notice how we don't have big concrete barriers. Engineers will tell you that one of the best ways to save lives is to have one-way traffic that is separated, which our interstates are. Engineers will also tell you that those barriers help save lives because by and large they prevent cars from jumping over to oncoming traffic when they do crash. We do not have concrete barriers all throughout Montana. We have them in a few areas, but not very many areas. More often than not, if you see something, it's going to be the wires, the tension wires, running along the center. Go ahead, Jason.
Do you have speed limits?
We do. We have a speed limit now. When I first moved to Montana in 1995, it was reasonable and prudent. We were stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base. I was married to a man in the Air Force, and still married to that same man. He's just not in the Air Force now. And you have a briefing when you come to a new base, and they told us the speed limit is reasonable and prudent. Make sure you have a $5 bill cash in your glove box so that you can pay your fine and move on. Speeding now, 10 miles an hour over, is a $20 fine in Montana and no points. When you come to Montana, please do not speed, especially not in the wintertime. When you lose control of, we have miles and miles and miles of road. Maintenance is an issue, especially in the wintertime. You have to drive safe for road conditions. It's incumbent upon every driver to make sure that you and your passengers and everybody else on the roadway is safe. So please don't bring your Ferrari that you got from your life savings and come up and tear through Montana. Our troopers will catch you, and I'm glad that they will. There's my safety plug. So, outside, it was near Hardin. Most of our crashes are going to be near a city, not necessarily in a major metropolitan area. We don't have major metropolitan areas, but a lot of them will happen near a city, and so whatever group of law enforcement officers reside in that or patrol that area will respond. Now, if it's a rural crash, there are a couple of cities that do have crash teams, have a couple people who've been to crash reconstruction training. But if it's anywhere else in Montana, you're most likely going to coordinate with the Montana Highway Patrol. And I just want to say at the outset what a wonderful organization they are, and I want to thank Sergeant Hazelton, who is in charge of their crash team. And in this particular case, we have Trooper Freivolds, who helped me put this presentation together. Last I knew, there were 8 on his team for the entire state. And for those of you who don't know, Montana is a very, very large state. So they are stretched thin. They are going from crash to crash with a lot of windshield time, okay? So here's a picture of the interstate. This is Hardin right there. And the interstate at this point is going east-west, 90. Now I'm gonna give you a little bit more perspective, I think. There you go. The red drop pin is Hardin, and you can see it's near Billings. Hardin is in Bighorn County, so the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office is there, and this is an aside, but still something that we all face and should think about. Bighorn County abuts Yellowstone County. Yellowstone County has more money. Bighorn County gets their deputies trained. Yellowstone County is attractive, and so they are constantly going through deputies. And I can't say enough about the level of professionalism, not only for the troopers who responded, but for everybody. One of the things that you have to do, and you can see it with the geography, and I talked about it in these small communities, we care about our neighbors, we care about each other, we care about everybody in Montana, we care about everybody in Montana coming through Montana. Just like Jason was saying, we want to be proactive in saving lives. So we, across the state, and I'm sure everybody does this, but in Montana, we set up plans ahead of time. It's basically an emergency preparedness plan, for lack of a better term, something that everybody can relate to. What are we going to do when disaster falls? This is, again, another view of the interstate. This is closer to Billings, so you can see there are more hills. And I will go ahead and play a video. This is captured by an iPhone. This is a crash that occurred, a very sudden dust storm. We've all experienced the wind. You didn't know it was a character in our talk today. The wind that you've experienced here suddenly gusted across the interstate. And it was a beautiful day in July. So that last picture, let me go back one. Can I go? Yep. So this is what it looked like before. And then this video is what all of a sudden came upon the road. It's going to play. I can hear it, Corey, but I can't see it. There we go. So this is the aftermath.
What we know, the dust storm hit drivers suddenly at 4:30 Friday afternoon, a few miles outside of Hardin.
This was really bad. I want to get off the road.
Drivers tell us they were blinded by the storm and saw vehicles colliding around them.
This is crazy.
Montana Highway Patrol released more details about the accident Monday, saying 21 vehicles were involved in the pileup. They were from 9 different states and 1 Canadian province. In total, 29 people were involved in the pileup, and along with the 6 people killed, 11 people were injured, 3 with critical injuries. With drivers describing dust columns up to 200 feet in the air ambulances could not get in to help, and everyone injured was taken by ground ambulance to the Bighorn County Memorial Hospital, and the people most seriously injured were then transported to Billings.
Okay, so that gives you a flavor of what happened. I'll just jump to the end because I know everybody's curious usually. There were no charges recommended after the crash investigation was done. What happened was drivers suddenly had this onset of dust and were blinded, and some of them stopped. Did anybody hear what the person taking the video said? The person was actually driving. They said, I'm going to pull over, right? So it's human instinct. I need to get out of this. I need to stop, and that's what people did. Nobody could see what was going on. I'm sure many of you have driven in snowy conditions probably, or rainy conditions. So this is very much that type of scenario, except it happened in the middle of July, and nobody was prepared for it at all. So that is why there were no criminal charges brought. This is a diagram. I'm not going to go into the investigation in this regard, but I knew that there would be people who would be interested to see what that looked like. I don't know if everybody here knows, but in the late 90s, GHSA, NHTSA, some other organizations deemed it was important to standardize the way in which we collect crash data. That's one of the reasons we have such great crash data. It's also one of the reasons that a lot of the crashes are reported and look the same. I wanted to make sure that we illustrated what it looked like. We also use total station. I want to tell you, because we have the emergency preparedness plans, all the different agencies that responded to this. We had the Montana Highway Patrol, Bighorn Sheriff's Office, the Yellowstone Sheriff's Office, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, American Medical Response, Bighorn County Ambulance, Bighorn Volunteer Fire Department, Hardin Public Schools. Any guesses why Hardin Public Schools responded? School buses. School buses were part of that emergency plan. So the uninjured were transported via school bus. And I asked Trooper Freivolds if he had a checklist or a standard operating procedure. In Montana, again, the troopers are spread thin. They are usually the ones who respond to these crashes. Oftentimes, it's just them and any other deputy or one other person who respond to these crashes. Obviously, this was a much larger scale. There were many more people. But their protocol starts with saving lives because they anticipate being first or second on the scene, so attending to all of the injured persons. That is a priority. I could go on and on about that, but when these plans are made, it's how do we save lives? It's always the number one priority. How do we prevent this from happening, and how do we save lives? Then they talk to witnesses. They assess the scene. They talk to witnesses. They collect information from the vehicles, from the road. They mark the road. They do their crash investigation. They clean up. So much of that is very similar to the crash team that Jason was talking about insofar as procedure. This had the interstate shut down for 5.5 hours. Again, I'm very proud of my state because, yes, there was pressure to open it up. It wasn't tremendous pressure because we value people. We value their lives. We will always put victims first. And if there is somebody who forgets that, yes, for every hour that the interstate is shut down, this many millions of dollars of commerce are lost, there are just as many people in Montana who are saying somebody lost a loved one, and there's no amount of money that you can pay any of us to replace that person. So that is the crash in Montana. There's another perspective of it. And we're going to move on to the last question. I think we missed it, Corey. There we go. What do you think is the most important issue for rural area crashes? And go ahead and type your ideas. I'm going to tell you what I think because I've already said it. I think it's being prepared. I think it's talking ahead of time, knowing which agencies need to be involved. If you are a prosecutor, this does not exclude you. I have not talked about the prosecutors in these cases. Obviously, these cases are put together. They're sent to the prosecutor. The prosecutor ultimately decides whether or not to bring charges. Yes, that is our role. But in these smaller communities, those prosecutors are also community leaders, and they are involved in the planning ahead of time. How can I respond? Do I need to arrive out on the scene so that I can see what happened myself, so that if it does come to trial, I am now advocating in the best way possible? Am I on the volunteer fire department? Am I responding in that capacity? If I am, who is going to prosecute my case? So these are the kinds of things that we need to know in the rural jurisdictions. So if you didn't have any ideas, there you go. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was going to ask you another question.
Yeah.
What do you think that prosecutors can do to be in the best position to actually prosecute these cases and do right by the victims?
Contact their TSRP. I haven't talked about it yet, but there was no TSRP when I was a county attorney, and my cases were either DUI or partner family member assault. And back then, we didn't have any basic training for prosecutors. So basically, I'd been to law school, I'd practiced law for a while, and all of a sudden I'm thrown into this, and I got to figure it out. I would have loved to have had a TSRP to lean on and to have gotten training from ahead of time. I did lean on my officers. I got as much training from them as possible. We talked about scenarios ahead of time so that I would be prepared. I think that is one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about the TSRP program and why I was so excited to launch it in Montana, is because I knew how important it would have been in my role, especially when I am a jack of all trades and master of none.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's excellent. I think it's a great, oh, here we go.
Right, not to plug the TSRP program, but go
Right.
TSRPs.
Got to believe it.
All right, let's see what we have. Response time, yeah. Yeah, that's critical. Response time and getting people to the medical care that they need so that they can have lives saved. Preservation of life, limited resources. It is pretty cool to see how the community comes together. for that goal. Pre-planning, time to get there, coordination, properly trained responders, and well-made plans. Yeah, part of our plan, thank you for that, whoever wrote that. Part of our plan included improving the training of our local hospital. What, everybody's laughing. What am I missing? Cows. Jared. Okay, so not that I'm going to take everything seriously, but I can take everything seriously. One of the most horrific crashes we had in Prairie County was cattle on the road. Montana is a fence-out state. And what that means is if you want to keep livestock off of your property, you are responsible for building a fence to keep your neighbor's cow out of your cornfields. Okay? What that also means is the Department of Transportation has miles and miles and miles and miles of fence that they pay for ranchers to put up to keep the animals off of the highways. And in some cases, they just don't exist. And there are cows there, and when it's a car versus a cow, the car loses. The cow doesn't win.
Yeah, it's kind of a draw.
Excellent. Now we're going to vote on that. It's another 177 seconds, Jason, while they're voting.
It is. And the other thing I think that prosecutors can do to be in a good position to prosecute these cases, preparation on our part as well. So we hope that our law enforcement agencies are in coordination with the fire departments and the other emergency services personnel to be prepared to investigate these crashes, but we also have to be prepared to prosecute them. So reach out to your TSRPs, talk with them, but get the training and get to know your police officers, get to know your state troopers, get to know your deputy sheriffs, especially the ones that show an interest in traffic crime investigation, traffic prosecution, or traffic enforcement. Go on a ride along with them. Understand exactly how it is they spend their day, because there is a tremendous amount that goes on staring through the windshield of a police car that we as prosecutors, I don't think, fully appreciate. And if we understand what they do and why they do it, we are going to be in a much better position to be that police officer's translator for that jury in that criminal case. We're going to be better prepared to ask the right questions, we'll know what answers to expect, and we're going to have that rapport with that valuable team member that we have in this criminal prosecution.
Yeah, I would also encourage anybody who's never sat down. If you're a prosecutor, it doesn't really matter your discipline. What law enforcement does is really pretty cool and fascinating, and they will talk to you about what they do to the degree that they can. So if you know somebody who investigates crashes, ask them to walk you through what that looks like. If you know somebody who investigates DUIs, ask them to walk you through what that looks like. Not only does that help inform you about their role, especially if you're a prosecutor so that you can translate for the jury, but it also gives that officer an opportunity to connect with the community, and they are learning how now to testify in court because they're just having a conversation about what a DUI investigation or crash investigation looks like in a way that is understandable. All right, what do we have here? Who's the winner? Response time. Response time is huge. Between response time and getting medical care, the right quality of medical care, the right caliber of medical care, that's really what it takes to save lives. All right, I think we are at the end of our slide deck. I say that hesitantly. Oh, who's our winner? Mighty Gazelle. Who's Mighty Gazelle? Woo! Clap.
Oh, we got one more.
We do.
Holy cow.
Working crashes in urban, this is the last one. What do you think? We don't have 180 seconds. Working crashes in urban areas is easier than rural areas. And I'm just going to jump to my answer, which is what Jason and I learned in having this discussion and all this preparation that we've done for this presentation is that they're different.
Yeah.
Everybody's goals are the same. Everybody shows up at work and works the hours that they're assigned and then some, and they're just different. Let's see if everybody agrees. You remember I said there's no wrong answer? Well, look at that. Good answer.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Good job. We will throw up, I think the next slide, Corey, is our contact information. Is that correct? Oh, geez Louise. Oh, this is a gee whiz. In 2021, 60% of fatal crashes occurred on urban roads. True or false? So I think the issue is, oh, if I click it, Corey, is that what you're signaling? Oh, look, I shortcutted it. Oh, well, I don't know who put Corey in the corner, but, but it is false. It is false. All right, there's our contact information. Please reach out to us if you have questions. Before we wrap it up, if you do have any questions that you'd like to share, we do have some time. Stacy has a microphone. Any questions, Stacy?
Any questions? Well, I have a question
Yes, ma'am.
for you, for both of you, actually. What is something that you hope that folks will take away from this session?
I hope that people take away from this session a renewed respect for the people who work in our rural areas. So often, all the war stories and all the cool stuff and the real prosecutors work in urban areas and the real law enforcement work in rural areas. And I never felt like I wasn't a real prosecutor. I may have felt overwhelmed and underqualified and ill-prepared because I wasn't as fluent at my craft as I might have been had I had a larger caseload. But I never didn't feel like a real prosecutor. I never felt like my victims didn't deserve the same level of justice that an urban area does. And we are not good in our respective professions at not being competitive. There's this natural characteristic among us, this natural urge to compete. And I really want everybody to appreciate how real it is to practice and work in rural areas. And rather than feeling like you're better or they're less, maybe recognize where your talents are different. What can you learn from somebody in a rural area? What might you have to offer somebody in a rural area? How can you work together to save lives? That's what I'd like people to take away.
I think that is a fantastic answer. I really do.
Thanks, Jason.
I think it is really great. I think what I'd like to see people take away from here, and I'm going to kind of dovetail on what you said, but just that every one of you is absolutely appreciated. Every one of you is absolutely necessary. The work that you do is vital, whether you do it in a big city, whether you do it in a rural area, a rural county, whether your backup is 30 seconds away or 3 hours away. We recognize that we cannot make it as a community without your efforts. Law enforcement officers, prosecutors, traffic safety personnel, what you do matters. What you do saves lives every day. We don't appreciate you enough. And I would like for you to take, not only from this session, but also really from this conference, the sense that you are appreciated. We thank you all very much. You matter, and really just mean the world to all of us.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do have a few more minutes. If you'd like to take more questions, or if you
I'm
want to
here for it.
wrap it up. If you do want to wrap it up, I have one burning question that Erin Inman can answer for us.
Well, I don't know
Let
how to
us
say
know
no
which-
to that.
All right, Erin, since you're from Montana, how accurate is the Yellowstone show?
If you would like to watch some good TV about Montana, there is a documentary, and I hope by not answering, I'm answering the question. There is a documentary called Class C, and this is a basketball story. Class C is our smallest, now I have jurisdiction stuck in my head, class of sports. So the very, very small schools are in the Class C schools in Montana. I think it was in 2008. Phil Jackson, anybody know who Phil Jackson, of Bulls, Chicago Bulls fame? Yeah, so he when he was younger, I think his parents were missionaries, if I remember correctly. So he gives some insight throughout the documentary, and it talks to the smaller schools, and it's Class C The only sport in town, and it's basketball. It talks about the importance of basketball in the smaller communities. It goes on and highlights some of the reservations and how that for some people is a vehicle to get out of poverty, to go to college. I haven't watched it yet. There's another documentary that just aired in November about Millie, I don't remember her name, about 1992, the first tribal woman, I think she was Blackfeet, who went and played for the Lady Grizz on full scholarship. She was one of 5,000 women that year, the only one of 5,000 women who had a full ride scholarship to have been a member of a tribal community. So those are some TV shows I would encourage you to watch about Montana. If you're a reader, pick up Buster Midnight's Cafe. It's a great historical fiction that the women who lived through World War II who were in my book group, that resonated with them. So Buster Midnight's Cafe for reading. Any questions from the audience? If not, I think we're ready to let you go.